At the core of economics disparity lie race relations, one of which has been more tense than harmonious. Author and professor at the University of Missouri, Robert Weems Jr. stated, "A truly free people possesses the power to produce as well as consume." He also implored, "The future demands the development of strategies that will stimulate more constructive economic activity within the Black community." Historically, POADUS have been at the bottom as producers, while being at the top as consumers. What we may not have focused on is that this stat now has a global effect, as well as returns. Hence Horowitz's profoundly accurate statement. In addition to culture bandits, economic disparity is at the root of this intergenerational dilemma. You'll also find at the core of the historic imbalance of race relations lie economics, and the core of that is the strategy better known as leakage. Author of Our Black Year, Maggie Anderson reports, "A dollar circulates among banks, shopkeepers, and other business for nearly a month in Asian American communities before that money flows out of the neighborhood. In Jewish communities, that neighborhood circulation is roughly 20 days, and in predominantly white Anglo-Saxon Protestant communities, it is 17 days. In POADUS neighborhoods, 6 hours. Where are we in business? Better yet, where are we in ownership? What is our domestic and international contribution to entrepreneurship? Could it be possible our social economic predicament is due to our lack in business development? Less than 2 cents of every dollar POADUS spend in this country goes to Black-owned businesses. White-owned firms have an average annual sales of $439,479, whereas Black-owned firms just $74,018. In 1997, POADUS represented 13% of the population, but owned only 3% of all U.S. businesses, which generated 2% of the nation's business revenues. Let's be clear, it is not in the best interest of others to help Blacks become more competitive. We live in a capitalistic world where economics is key to resource accessibility. If one moves as an entrepreneur, they afford access to the 3 basic needs. As a consumer, they are simply feeding someone else's families these needs. A comparative analysis of our social economic conditions shows that POADUS have entered the new millennium much the same way they entered the previous 4 centuries, as impoverished, powerless, and neglected people. For well over 95% POADUS, the money earned to put food on the table for our families come from non-POADUS. This is the source of our problem, for if we created more, we'd have more. If we had more, we'd respect more. As a result of not having attained these needs, we don't respect our communities enough, nor the economic prosperity it brings, because we simply do not own within our communities. Let's be real. Our dilemma comes from a rooted spell of cultural amnesia, seen today evolving into the reason we don't respect our neighborhoods, because we simply don't see us as owners. We don't see ourselves as owners of the corner store, the local supermarket, the dry cleaners, the laundromat, nor even the gas station. This has a psychological effect, for our not seeing ourselves as owners makes us believe we can only be workers. And as evident in most major cities, the unemployment rate hovers between 50 to 60% for POADUS men. This deemed complex formula has the perfect answer to this riddle. Why is unemployment for us so high? Because entrepreneurship is very low. How is it POADUS have a collective purchasing power of nearly 1.5 trillion, yet we have the highest unemployment and crime rates among POADUS males, while being just 13% of the U.S. population? In global travel, of the $90+ billion spent each year, we spend nearly half. We think we have no money, when in actuality we do. There's just no black businesses to give it to. Creating and supporting black businesses creates jobs for black people. As a demographic in terms of marketing, we are the quintessential prime rib to the world economy, primarily because of our history of being 99% consumer and 1% producer. Between 1990 and 2007, POADUS buying power rose 166%, from $318 billion to $845 billion. White advertising firms caught on, and in 2002 spent $454.9 million to market to us, including cable TV, internet sites, and magazines. In 2006, that spending power jumped by nearly 73% to $791 million. The U.S. Census Bureau data shows that our population of about 40 million is growing 34% faster than the population as a whole, and that the number of POADUS households making at least $75,000 has increased 47% since 2005. It's evident we don't know our power, and there are many diversions to keep us from connecting the dots. Although it's easy for racism to be the igniter to this historical issue, a competent counter has always been in place. We were just lulled to sleep by the illusion of inclusion. Author Walimu Baruti explains, credit cards have given many of us the illusion of affluence. It is a serious statement about the state of the economy when individuals stigmatized as bad credit risks are accorded by financial institutions to borrow money for cars and homes. That the bulletin boards on our college campuses are plastered with credit card applications is even more telling. Students are the worst credit risks. They have no job, no money, and no guarantee of a job. Yet, they graduate strapped with thousands of dollars of credit indebtedness. The credit card business venture is more than twice as profitable as any other banking venture because if you borrow $2,500 and pay only the minimum monthly amount due, it would not only take 20 years to pay it off, but you would also have paid over $6,000 in interest. Yet awareness of this has neither kept us from being the most conspicuous of all consumers. For POADUS, banks give lesser home loans, and for those they do, have higher interest rates. On September 28, 2015, Fifth Third Bank Corp agreed to pay $21 million for compensation to POADUS and Hispanic borrowers who were overcharged for car loans. In 1925, 18 Baltimore neighborhood associations came together to form the Allied Civic and Protection Association for the purpose of urging both new and existing property owners to sign restrictive covenants, asking owners to commit to never selling to POADUS. And this was legal. Restrictive covenants were not merely private agreements between homeowners, they frequently had government sanction. In Baltimore, the city-sponsored Committee on Segregation organized neighborhood associations throughout the city that could circulate and enforce such covenants. POADUS families were prevented from moving into white neighborhoods by explicit policy of the Federal Housing Administration. The FHA not only refused to insure mortgages for black families in white neighborhoods, it also refused to insure mortgages in black neighborhoods, a policy that came to be known as redlining, because neighborhoods were colored red on government maps to indicate that these neighborhoods should be considered poor credit risks as a consequence of POADUS living in or near them. The FHA also barred POADUS families from obtaining bank mortgages for house purchases, even in suburban divisions, which are privately financed without federal construction loan guarantees. The recent Baltimore riots, triggered by yet another death of a black child, has many thinking the rioters destroyed their own community. But what do we own there? The projects? The drugstore? This is no different than the revolts our ancestors had when they burned the plantation. Oh, we may live there, but owners, we're not. We must understand, at the root of economic deprivation lie the lack of land ownership. A more familiar word is gentrification. In addition to banking discrimination, our inability to maintain land ownership in our communities can be linked to gentrification. This practice, however, goes back as far as the Nile Valley of Kemet. When the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible, and we had the land. They said, "Let us pray," and we closed our eyes. When we opened them, we had the Bible, and they had the land. Baruti states, "The argument has been put forth that internationally, Africans are viewed as no more than slave labor, and whoever controls that labor will rule the world. Interestingly, no other people is viewed in this way. This is one of the main reasons why Europeans, Arabs, and Asians are now fighting over the African continent and its human resources. Sadly, so many of us are competing with each other to welcome aliens into our homeland." If you leave it up to their story, history will have you thinking there was only one Black Wall Street. Marcus Garvey once said, "A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." An awareness of history is vital if we are to exist in the next 20 years. When studying cooperatives, we will find there is no need to reinvent the wheel. We were once very good at it. Historically, we pulled funds together in the form of cooperatives. Cooperatives are pools of people who voluntarily use their services for their mutual, social, economic, and cultural benefit. There are many kinds of cooperatives. Susus, for example, were common, where some evolved into credit unions. Today, there are more than 1 billion members of cooperatives throughout the world. But how many are of African descent? Although cooperatives may be a new term to many, its practice is as old as our history, both in Africa as well as in the Americas pre-emancipation. It can also be documented as recent as during the latter part of the Great Depressions of the 1930s. We see once again, POADUS had to join forces to survive. This energy was directed towards doing for self. Both Marcus Garvey's United Negro Improvement Association and Brooklyn, New York's Paragon Progressive Community Association served as a driving force to the idea of Black economic independence. Just over a decade earlier in Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, stood Black Wall Street, a wealthy independent town inhabited and owned by POADUS that was destroyed in the Tulsa race riots May 1st, 1921 by neighboring whites. History's also done a great job in hiding the fact that Tulsa was not the only Black Wall Street. In fact, the original Black Wall Street was in New York City, not far from today's Central Park, originally called Seneca Village. Not far from Wall Street, the nexus of global trade, which once included kidnapped Africans as its commodity.